Good afternoon and welcome to NHK's live transmission of the ceremony of accession to the throne from the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. We'll be on the air in English until 2 o'clock this afternoon. In the studio we have Mamoru Moroyoshi of NHK's political department, Nobuo Tsuchiya of the City Desk and Ikuo Wada of the Foreign News Department. We'll also have comments from Professor Isao Tokoro of the Kyoto Sangyo University and from the curator of the Folklore Museum, Gafu Izutsu.
At the Imperial Palace, those who are attending the ceremony have already arrived. We have a live report from the Imperial Palace.
This is from the Imperial Palace. The Seiden-no-gi shall take place in the Matsunoma, the state room which is in the center of this building. From 7 o'clock this morning, there have been preparations for setting the scene for the ceremony in this courtyard. And we have started to see some of those who will be present at the ceremony attending this, coming to this courtyard. There are 73 attendants who are called Teijo Saieksha and who have permission to enter this part of the palace, ready for the ceremony to begin. 158 nations and 2 international organizations shall be represented, and it's possible to see that many foreign representatives are now present and are waiting for the ceremonies to begin. And from 1 o'clock, we shall be seeing the Emperor and the Empress entering the Seiden, the Matsunoma, and they will be seated in the Takamikura and the Michodai when a proclamation, a declaration will be read out to the effect that the Emperor has officially taken the new role of Emperor. And then the ceremony itself will last for approximately 30 minutes and will finish with the Prime Minister leading those present in 3 chairs. 2,500 is the number of those who will be actually present at this part of the ceremony. And there are special seats in the Chowa-den and also by the Howa-den, Homei-den. We feel that they will be taking their seats around 12:45.
The banners are very colorful against the blue skies. Mr. Wada, as we just saw, we have a number of foreign dignitaries taking part in the ceremony. I think just as many as guests are coming, just like the Emperor's funeral.
Yes, at the actual funeral, the Imperial funeral, we had 164 nationalities, but when we look at the number of heads of states, we have approximately 70, which is 10 more than the number of heads of states who were able to attend the Imperial funeral. 167 nations and the United Nations and the European Community were the number of foreign organizations and representatives which were invited. But after the events of the unification of the 2 Germanys and the Iraq-Kuwaiti issue, the invitation to Iraq has now been withdrawn, and 7 nations, including Cambodia, have declined the invitation. So that is why we have the total number remaining. It's possible now to see that we have live footage showing you the guests entering the Imperial Palace. That is from the southern entrance to the actual palace itself. As a matter of protocol, His Highness King Baudouin of Belgium is given the most important position because, of course, he has the longest reign. As for other royal families, we have the Prince and the Princess of Wales here in Japan for the 2nd time. The Prince of Wales will be celebrating his 42nd birthday tomorrow, actually, here in Japan.
They just arrived at the Imperial Palace.
And from the Philippines, we have President Aquino, 4 years and 8 months after taking her current position. Of course, we have a number of difficult problems within the Philippines. From the United States, we have Vice President Mr. Quayle, and he has also been spending some time in meeting with other foreign representatives and dignitaries, talking about the Gulf issue and so forth. From the Soviet Union, we have Mr. Lukyanov, and probably the busiest man in the entire world, Mr. de Quayle, from the United Nations, Secretary General. I believe the two gentlemen arrived on the same flight. From East Germany, we also have a number of extremely important people. From Czechoslovakia, we have Mr. Dobček. He was the first secretary of the party, the Communist Party, in 1968. And he has just made a comeback in his political life last year. And from China, we have the Vice Premier. And I think he is probably the most important representative from China to visit us since the Tiananmen.
So far, 21 cases of sabotages by radicals took place today, and now we would like to take a look at the legal basis for the of the ceremony today.
Well, concerning the legal basis, I think there are 2 points that you can raise. First, we can look at the Constitution, Article 2 of which says, the imperial throne shall be dynastic and succeeded to in accordance with the Imperial House law passed by the dead. And in the actual Imperial House law, section 24, it's possible to see that a ceremony of accession shall be held when there has been a succession in the title of the emperor. However, when we look at the situation, in the pre-war period, we had the laws which covered the actual method and procedures to be followed. The government has established a constitution committee to discuss the situation, headed by the Prime Minister. And the discussion was carried out, and it was decided that the ceremony of accession and the celebration of Thanksgiving shall be carried out separately and on separate dates. One to be carried out as a state ceremony, the other to be carried out as an imperial family occasion, that this will not be a state occasion.
There was a lot of constitutionality discussion.
Yes. I think the crux of the matter is really politics and religion, the separation of the religion and the state. Those who are against the idea of this series of ceremonies state that the ceremonies are based on Shintoism, that they are highly religious in nature, and that if these are to be supported by the state, then that would go against the basic understanding of the Article 20 of the Constitution, which separates religion and state. However, concerning actual ceremonies, it's possible to see that we have a division of those that are supported and carried out by the state and those that are carried out and supported by under the auspices of the imperial family. And also looking at past Supreme Court rulings, what is really not permitted is to have particular religious support or religious meaning being attached to ceremonies or to certain actions. This would not be the case here.
Now, Mr. Tsuchiya, the ceremony is about to begin this afternoon, and let's go over the procedures of the ceremony.
Well, the Seiden-no-gi itself, that will cover enthronement, is basically a declaration and an opportunity to receive the well wishes, the good wishes of the representatives from Japan and from around the world. We have 500 foreign representatives, and we also have dignitaries, former statesmen, about 2,000 of those, giving a total of 2,500 people who will be present at the actual ceremonies. And ever since the new Imperial Palace was completed in 1968, I think it's the first time that so many people have been permitted to visit the palace grounds itself, the palace buildings. What you're seeing right now are the preparations for the actual ceremony, which will begin from 1 o'clock. You can see what are called the igi no mono. Those will be ceremonial attendants and officials preparing for the ceremony itself. There is a new wooden structure like a stage which has been constructed in front of the Chowa-den and the Homei-den. Approximately 1 month was required for the actual building operation. The Matsunoma has also had quite a great deal of work being done on it. That is where the actual enthronement ceremony will take place. And as you can see now, we have an 18-step set of stairs leading up to the actual palace itself. In the courtyard, it's possible to see banners. These are imperial banners, and here we have a photograph showing you the Takamigura.
Professor Tokoro, this is the picture of Takamikura, and there is another one called Michodai. What we should look for when you look at these structures?
The Takamikura itself was first created about 1,200-300 years ago. What is going to be used on this occasion was constructed 75 years ago. It was used at the ceremonies for both the Emperors Taisho and for Emperor Showa, and it has been preserved in Kyoto for many years. It was restored, and it's possible to see that, as we have heard, quite a thorough job of restoration was carried out on it. I think it is an extremely important occasion that we're witnessing today, and the Michodai and the Takamikura will be set side by side. These were originally set in a purely Japanese-style building in Kyoto, in the Shishinden, part of the Imperial Palace in Kyoto, but now they have been brought to the Matsunoma, which is done in the Western style, here in the Imperial Palace in Tokyo.
Mr. Izutsu, we just saw banners against the beautiful blue skies, and you are the experts in colors and costumes. What are the points that we should look for?
Well, as this is what is considered to be a hare, or a celebratory occasion, setting up banners and setting up hangings is one of the basic ways of celebration. It's also possible that we have a special hanging called moko, which is sort of a curtain or a curtained drape hanging, which has cloud shapes on it in 5 colors. As for the banners themselves, you can see the red Banzai Ban, and then we have the other red and white banners and 5 colored banners. The 5 colors that are used on these occasions are also extremely important. You have the colors for the different directions of the compass. The so-called name for those is the Tonnan Shape, which mean the 4 directions of the compass. And then we have yellow, which would symbolize the earth, the fecundity of the earth. So in addition to the east, west, south, and north, we have those 5 colors, and these would indicate true and wholehearted celebration and thanksgiving on this auspicious occasion.
Those were the drums that we just saw, and as Mr. Izutsu mentioned, there were short drapes under the roof of the Seiden. That is called Bogaku. The characters read Bogaku, but it's read as Moko. Coming back to the colors you just mentioned, what color does east stand?
Is blue.
East, next south is red.
Red.
And west
White.
is okay. And North is?
Black. But on this occasion they use purple.
And yellow is?
Is the earth.
Okay. And those are the 5 colors? So those colors indicate the glory of the emperor. They're coming back to the banners that Mr. Izutu mentioned and the color combinations. They are different than the ceremony of accession by Showa emperor. What are the differences?
Well, as for the changes and the differences, I think we can point out a number quite easily. First of all, the basic positioning has not really changed for the actual banners, but 3 patterns have now been changed.
So the locations and arrangements are the same, but the patterns are different. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. 3 have been altered. If you could just look at these, I think it's possible that first we have the Banzai Bang. On the occasion of the enthronement of the Emperor Showa, here we have an enlargement. We had 5 fish and an itsuhe, which is a wine jar. Those were embroidered on the actual banner. This is the second type of banner which was used. It is the Yatagarasu banner. Here we have a crow. And then we had the Reishigata Daikinban, where we had a golden kite, which was also embroidered. These 3 patterns have now been altered.
Why is that?
Because those patterns which we saw on the occasion of the Emperor Showa's enthronement were introduced for the first time on the enthronement of the Emperor Taisho based on Japanese mythology. This is going to be the first enthronement ceremony under the auspices of the new constitution, and so in the light of the spirit of the new constitution, post-war constitution, these would not be appropriate.
In about 20 minutes, the Seiden-no-gi ceremony will begin. First, the emperor will come forward and take a seat in the Takamikura in the center of Matsunoma. And then the empress comes into the Matsunoma and takes a seat in Michodai. And then the emperor proclaims his accession to the throne, and Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu will then deliver congratulatory remarks, followed by cheers of Banzai. These are the main items in the procedures of the ceremony. Mr. Wada, we just heard that the King Bodwin is going to be seated in the best place, and what are the other seatings?
Well, concerning the Seiden-no-gi, the enthronement, I think it's possible to see that the actual foreign participants will be seated facing left as you face the actual building itself. But here, of course, the order of precedence, protocol is extremely important. Who is to be given higher recognition than the others? And this is always an extremely delicate and important issue. Of course, everything starts here with protocol and with precedence. According to international protocol, heads of state, we just happen to be able to see the Prince and Princess of Wales. The Prince and Princess of Wales are seated at around the 60th or the 70th in terms of importance, but those who are given precedence are the heads of state and then presidents. And the person who has the highest precedence here is King Baudouin of the Belgians. This is because of his length of reign. And after that, we would be having the royal family members, which would also include Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. Then after that, we would be able to see the vice presidents, including Mr. Quayle, and then prime ministers, and those who represent the legislative and also judiciary branches, and foreign missions. Foreign missions would be seated according to the length of stay here in Japan.
That was the explanation about the order of precedence. The Seiden-no-gi is going to be the first one under the new constitution. What are the points?
Well, first of all, it will be quite different from the pre-war system because the issue is how do we manage to marry the constitutional monarchy that we have under the new constitution with the traditions of the pre-war period. We have seen a great deal of thought being given to this situation. Firstly, the Prime Minister will be leading the three cheers. In this manner, previously, the Prime Minister was expected to go down to the courtyard after coming down from the palace itself, but the three cheers will be led from the palace. And it's possible to see that for the banners, as we've already heard, we have seen a change in some of the motifs. But probably the biggest point of interest is the address which will be read out by the Emperor himself, what he will be able to say, and how perhaps the Emperor, His Imperial Majesty, will be touching upon issues such as the Constitution.
So in other words, the harmony between the tradition and the symbolism is the key. And that is another interesting thing is that how is his remarks going to change from his remarks at immediately after the enthronement?
Well, I think it's basically going to be an opportunity to hear what the Emperor would say considering his ideals and what he would wish to do. On the occasion of the Emperor Showa, it was a very classical, extremely literary piece which was really read out. But on this occasion, this is the first enthronement under the new constitution, so the Emperor's symbol.
So these are the main points of interest in the accession ceremony. Now we would like to have a live report from the Imperial Palace.
Well, the Seiden-gi is going to be held at the Matsunoma room at the center of the Great Hall. This is the courtyard surrounded by the buildings, the palace buildings. In the palace, in the courtyard, ceremonial ornaments and banners are already in place. And the attendants carrying arrows and bows are also already in place, clad in their traditional costumes. And foreign dignitaries are arriving one after another, and they are seated in a room in Chowa-den, which is on the eastern side. Altogether, representatives from 158 countries and representatives from 2 international organizations are attending this ceremony. Their Majesties completed the ceremonial notification rites in the morning in the palace. They have finished changing into their ceremonial costumes and will soon enter Matsunoma. This is the Matsunoma. At the center is the Takamikura, the throne which will be ascended to by the emperor, and there is the Michodai, the seat for the empress. In the Seiden-no-gi, the emperor will ascend this Takamikura, the throne, and will announce his enthronement. It has a canopy, octagonal canopy. It's 6.48 meters tall, 6.06 meters wide, and 5.45 meters deep. On top of the roof, on the canopy, there are the phoenix birds. At the center is the main one, the big phoenix, and then there are the smaller ones on the 8 corners. There are mirrors placed in between the phoenix. The pillars are all lacquered black, and in between them are the black drapings, silk drapings, and the emperor will be inside here. And there are the mythical horses are depicted on the base of the canopy. This Takamikura, the throne, was made anew at the time of the enthronement of Emperor Taisho, and it was used for the enthronement of Emperor Showa. So in some 62 years, parts of that have fallen into pieces, and so they took 4 months to repair it. Now, next to the Takamikura, the throne, there is a smaller seat. This is the seat for the empress. The shape is more or less the same as the emperor's Takamikura, and there is a kind of phoenix at the top of the seat. The decorations are not as meticulous as the seat for the emperor. It is situated about 60 centimeters behind the backward to the emperor's throne. The emperor will descend to the Takamikura and will make the announcement that he has been enthroned, which will be followed by Prime Minister Kaifu giving congratulatory address and leading 3 chairs of Banzai. The Matsunoma is used for attestation ceremony of the state ministers or for receiving credentials from foreign ambassadors. It is also used for the poetry reading on the New Year's days. It is a very tall building, about 8 meters high, but still, as the Takamikura is very high, about 5 meters high, the room looks kind of small and low-ceilinged today. Now, following the traditional costumes, there are 78 people, the official attendants. Closest to this hall, the main hall, is the one called the bearers of the ornamental ceremonial ornaments. They are carrying bows and various other martial arts weapons. They are clad in black and in crimson. At the center of the courtyard are the bearers of the ceremonial items, and they are carrying sword, bow, halberd, arrows, and shields. There are 40 such people. And closest to the Seiden are the people clad in black. They carry sword, and then the next group are the ones who carry sword, I beg your pardon, arrows and bows. They are clad in crimson, and then they have the one carrying halberd and shields, all in light indigo. Then there are the drum bearers and gong bearers, and they are the ones who will give the cue to stand up or to be seated by either sounding the drum or the gong. They are the members of the Imperial Household Agency's musical band. White pebbles from Wakayama Prefecture are laid out on the courtyard, and then there are the banners, altogether some 26 banners. On the right-hand side of the state hall are the banners with the signs of the sun. It's the red blockade, and there is the golden sun. And on the right-hand side are the banners with signs of moon. Against the white blockade, there is the silver moon. Both of them are 8.9 meters from the ground in height. And on both sides, there are the Banzai banners, and there is the writing of Banzai, the chairs, on the banners. These Banzai characters were written by Prime Minister Kaifu. Behind, on both sides, are the large banners bearing the chrysanthemum crest, one in red and one in white. And then there are the medium versions, and there are the smaller versions. They are both very colorful. Most of the guests are already seated, guests from abroad as well. From the United States, we have Mr. and Mrs. Vice President and Mrs. Quayle. And from the Soviet Union, we have Mr. Lukyanov. And from the United Germany, we have President Richard von Weizsäcker. And from the Philippines, we have President Corazon Aquino. And from the United Kingdom, we have Prince and Princess of Wales. From Czechoslovakia, we have Mr. Alexander Dobček, the Speaker of the House. And from the South Korea, we have Prime Minister Kang Yon-fun. From the United Nations, the Secretary General Perez de Cuellar is attending. And representing the EC, the Vice President of EC Commission, Franz Andriessen, are in attendance. Apart from these foreign dignitaries, we have representatives from prefectural and municipal governments. Also from the citizens, representing the citizens, we have those who have made distinguished accomplishments in the area of sports, academia, culture, and so forth. We also have representatives from the overseas Japanese communities. And now Prime Minister Kai-fu and the heads of the three branches of government, including the Speaker of the House, Mr. Sakurauchi, President of the Upper House, Mr. Tsuchiya, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Mr. Kusaba, are entering the Matsunoma now. So far, in the past, we had the enthronement ceremony in Kyoto, and this is the first time that it is being held in Tokyo, and this is the first enthronement ceremony under the new constitution. At the time of the enthronement of Emperor Showa, then Prime Minister Tanaka attended the ceremony in full traditional costume. And now the male members of the imperial family are entering the Matsunoma, including the Crown Prince. And now the Crown Prince is entering, being led by the Chief Chamberlain of the Crown Prince's residence. The Crown Prince is wearing a special costume only permitted for the Crown Prince. It is yellowish red, and it has the patterns of mandarin ducks. Prince Akishino follows the Crown Prince. He is clad in black costume, and the pattern is the cranes flying in the sky among clouds. And Prince Hitachi follows. Prince Mikasa, Prince Tomohito of Mikasa, Prince Takamado. They are all entering the Matsunoma. Now the Crown Prince has entered the Matsunoma. Now the members of the female members of the imperial family are entering the Matsunoma. The first person to enter is Princess Kiko Shino, or Princess Akishino. Princess Akishino is wearing a traditional 12-layer kimono. It's purple in color on the top layer, and she is wearing a red skirt underneath. Following the male members of the imperial family, the female members of the imperial family are heading towards Matsunoma room. Princess Akishino is followed by Princess Nori. She is wearing a top layer, 12-layer kimono. The top layer is greenish purple. Now the female members of the imperial family are entering the Matsunoma room. Following Princess Nori is the Princess Hitachi, Princess Takamatsu, Princess Mikasa, Princess Tomohito of Mitaka, Princess Takamado. Now the female members of the imperial family are now in the Matsunoma, facing the male members of the imperial family. Now, His Majesty is proceeding towards Matsunoma room. He is being led by Mr. Sumiya, the Grand Master of the Ceremonies, and he is followed by Shoichi Fujimori, the Grand Steward of the Imperial Household Agency. The Emperor, His Majesty, is clad in Kokozen-no-goho. This is a costume which only the Emperor is permitted to wear. Now, red and yellow are mixed to make it brownish red, and this is to represent the color of the sun. And the patterns of Polonia, bamboo, phoenix, and mystical horses are used as patterns. The headgear has the tail standing up straight. His Majesty the Emperor completed the ceremonial notification rites in the 3 shrines in the Imperial Palace this morning. Now, in front and in the back of His Majesty, the sacred imperial treasures, the 2 of them, the first one, the sword, and the next one, the beads, are being carried. And this is followed by chamberlains who carry the seal of the emperor and the seal of the state. And then the procession is followed by Grand Chamberlain Satoru Yamamoto. Now, Her Majesty, the Empress, is now proceeding to the Matsunoma. She is being led by the Vice Master of the Ceremonies and by Vice Grand Chamberlain. The Empress is clad in the 12-layer traditional kimono. The top layer is white, and it has the patterns of pine trees and cranes. The colors are soft purple. Her Majesty is followed by 2 ladies in waiting. And right behind Her Majesty is the Chief Lady in Waiting, Mrs. Inoue. And to conclude the procession, Vice Grand Chamberlain Anraku is following. Her Majesty is now walking behind the throne and heading towards Michodai, the seat for the Empress. Everyone, including the chamberlains, have all taken their places now. The octagonal canopy, that is the throne of the emperor. There are drapes on 8 sides of this canopy, but these drapes, the 3 drapes on the 3 sides in front are going to be raised. They're going to be opened shortly. This throne, Takamikura, has the patterns that dates back from the Edo period, and also it has used some of the patterns used for Emperor Komei, and they have been duplicated. And now with the gong, the drapes, the central drapes were opened, and the emperor was seated in the chair. Now he is standing up in front of the chair. On both sides are the stands carrying the sword and the bead on one side, and the seal of the emperor and the seal of the state on the other side. Now the drapes for the canopy of the Empress's seat have also been opened by the ladies in waiting. Her Majesty's white robe contrasts sharply with the purple of the drapes and the crimson inside the canopy. There are 2,500 attending guests. They are all standing up now. They remain standing up. The drums sounded, and the attending guests bow. And soon His Majesty will deliver his words. Prime Minister Kaifu proceeds to the front of the imperial throne. His Majesty has given the baton to a chamberlain. And now His Majesty receives the speech manuscript from the Chief Chamberlain, Mr. Yamamoto. And these are the words of the Emperor.
"先に日本国憲法及び皇室典範の定めるところによって"
His Majesty says he has acceded to the throne in accordance with the Japanese Constitution and the Imperial House Law.
Seiden-no-giを行い、
He says this is being promulgated to Japan and the world through the ceremony of accession at the State Hall of the Imperial Palace.
この時にあたり、改めて
It is also a time, he says, to recall the achievements of his father, the late Showa Emperor, and what he did during his more than 60 years on the throne.
国民と苦楽を共にされた御心を心として常に国民の幸福を願いつつ
His Majesty says that the late Showa Emperor always shared the joys and sufferings of the Japanese
日
people.
本国および日本国民統合の象徴としての務めを果たすことを誓い
And His Majesty says he will always keep this in mind and will strive for the happiness of everyone. He says he will honor the Constitution and do his best to be the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, as stipulated by the Constitution. The Emperor expresses the sincere hope that Japan will continue to grow and develop through the wisdom and exertions of its people.
天皇陛下のお言葉でした。
These were the words of His Majesty. And the Grand Chamberlain receives the manuscript of the address from His Majesty. And now His Majesty receives his baton back. Now, Prime Minister Kaifu will deliver a congratulatory address on behalf of the Japanese people.
On behalf of the Japanese people, Mr. Kaifu offers words of congratulation on the Emperor's accession to the throne. He says it is a great pleasure for the people that the Emperor has held the ceremony of accession to the throne at the State Hall of the Imperial Palace to promulgate his enthronement worldwide. Mr. Kaifu says he respects the Emperor even more to hear that he'll learn from the example of the late Showa Emperor, who shared the joys and sufferings of the Japanese people, and that he'll follow in his father's footsteps. Mr. Kaifu refers to the Emperor's statements that he will honor the Constitution and that he will do his best to be the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, as stipulated by the Constitution. Mr. Kaifu says the Emperor has also promised to do all he can to ensure that Japan grows and develops, that it contributes to peace and friendship in the world, and the welfare and prosperity of mankind. Mr. Kaifu says the people will look up to the Emperor as a symbol of the state and of the country's unity. And he says he will pledge on behalf of the people to achieve a fresh start for Japan so that it's more open to the world, more energetic and more cultured. He says the Japanese people will strive for peace in the world and for the welfare of mankind. And Mr. Kaifu says he ends his words of congratulation by praying for peace in the Heisei era and for the well-being of the Emperor. 平成2年11月12日、内閣総理大臣海部俊樹。海部総理大臣の予言でした。Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu has just delivered a congratulatory speech, and now he would lead 3 chairs of Banzai. ご即位を祝して
天皇陛下万歳万歳万歳。
参列した人々によって
All those attending have joined the Prime Minister in 3 chairs of Banzai, and the 21-gun salute by the self-defense forces is fired. It's exactly 20 minutes since the ceremony began, and now the drapes for the imperial throne and for the seat of Her Majesty are closed. His Majesty said in his address that he will always keep in mind the fact that the late Showa Emperor always shared the joys and sufferings of the Japanese people. The Emperor also said that he will honor the Constitution and do his best to be the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people. Close to 2,500 guests are in attendance for the ceremony. Now they are seated again. Ever since becoming the emperor, Emperor Akihito has met many heads of state from other countries and foreign dignitaries. Altogether, he has met representatives from about 60 countries already. Now, His Majesty is descending the throne. A year and 10 months have passed since the death of Emperor Showa. Now the new emperor, Emperor Akihito, leads a very life and has been leading a very life already as the emperor of the country, meeting many people from overseas. But now he has proclaimed his enthronement officially to both Japan and the world by holding this ceremony. His Majesty is now withdrawing from the Matsunoma room. His Majesty will celebrate 57th birthday next month. And the next year, he will be meeting many foreign dignitaries like the President Bush of the United States and President Gorbachev of the Soviet Union. They are both expected to visit Japan next year. Her Majesty is now leaving the Matsunoma room. It's been 31 years since they were married in 1959 in April. They have 3 children, and also as Empress, she serves a very busy life in various public duties. During her times as Crown Princess, she has a very busy life in various social welfare activities. And this year, she has assumed the honorary presidency of the Japan Red Cross. I beg your pardon. In 1989, she assumed the position of honorary president of the Japan Red Cross. Both their Majesties, the Emperor and Empress, have left the Seiden, the State Hall. Soon the Crown Prince and other members of the imperial family will leave the State Hall. The enthronement ceremony lasted for about half an hour, going very smoothly as planned. We reported live from the State Hall in the Imperial Palace.
His Majesty says he has acceded to the throne in accordance with the Japanese Constitution and the Imperial House law. He says this is being promulgated to Japan and the world through the ceremony of accession at the State Hall of the Imperial Palace. It's also a time to recall the achievements of his father, the late Showa Emperor, and what he did during more than 60 years on the throne. His Majesty says that the late Showa Emperor always shared the joys and sufferings of the Japanese people. And he says he will always keep this in mind and will strive for the happiness of everyone. He says he will honor the Constitution and do his best to be the symbol of state and of the unity of the people as stipulated by the Constitution. And the Emperor stresses his sincere hope that Japan will continue to grow and develop through the wisdom and exertions of its people, and that it will contribute to friendship and peace in the world and to the welfare and prosperity of all humankind.
国民の英知とたゆみない努力によって我が国が一層の発展を遂げ国際社会の友好と平和人類の福祉と繁栄に寄与することを切に希望いたします。
Mr. Tsuchiya, what's your reaction?
Yes, the contents has the two key pillars, I think. In other words, one part is the determination of the emperor himself, and also the ideal is the other. These two said that together with the people of Japan, he will abide by the constitution, but this time he says that he will honor the constitution and do his best to the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people. I think his determination was expressed even further. And furthermore, at the time of the first audience, he said that he swear he will fulfill his responsibility in accordance with the Japanese constitution. But this time he said that he will do his best to be the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people. And this was not included. In other words, the term symbol of the state and of the unity of the people was not included in the address made at the time of the first audience, and I think he strongly expressed his determination to act as the symbol of the state. And also he expressed his desire to contribute to the friendship, Japan. He expressed his sincere hope that the Japan will continue to grow and develop through the wisdom and exertions of its people. And this is actually the spirit in the constitution, and he expressed his desire for that.
Now, Mr. Morohoshi, what are the characteristics of the Prime Minister's address?
I think Mr. Kaifu expressed congratulations as a representative of the people.
We hear the replay of Prime Minister's address.
Mr. Kaifu says it's a great pleasure for the people that the Emperor has held the ceremony of accession to the throne at the State Hall of the Imperial Palace to promulgate his enthronement worldwide. And he says he respects the Emperor even more to hear he will learn from the example of the late Showa Emperor, who shared the joys and sufferings of the Japanese people, and that he will follow in his father's footsteps. Mr. Kaifu refers to the Emperor's statement that he will honor the Constitution and that he will do his best to be the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, as stipulated by the Constitution. And Mr. Kaifu says that the Emperor has also promised to do all he can to ensure that Japan grows and develops, that it contributes to peace and friendship in the world, and to the welfare and prosperity of humankind. Mr. Kaifu says that the people will look up to the Emperor as the symbol of the state and of unity. He says he'll pledge on behalf of the people to achieve a fresh start for Japan so that it's more open to the world, more energetic and more cultured. Mr. Kaifu says that the Japanese people will strive for peace in the world and the welfare of mankind, and he ends his words of congratulation by praying for peace in the Heisei era and for the well-being of the Emperor.
At the Imperial Palace, the heads of the three departments of the government have visited the Matsunoma Hall. What are the characteristics of Mr. Kaifu's speech?
The major characteristics is the response. In other words, Mr. Kaifu said he was moved to the expression of the emperor's, new emperor's wish to act as the symbol of the people and the state. At the time of the accession ceremony last year, in a message in 1987, Mr. Tanaka, Giichi Tanaka, said that, in 1962, 62 years ago, Mr. Tanaka expressed his congratulations as a subordinate to the emperor. However, this time it is completely different. It was not a word of subordinate to the emperor.
Mr. Wada, what kind of special interest did foreign dignitaries have with this ceremony?
Yes, this is very peculiar to Japan. Nothing like this can be seen in any other parts of the world. So not every dignitaries from different parts of the world have left the ceremony site, but I felt that everybody looked happy.
Yes, these are live pictures. The Prince and Princess of Wales were smiling in another monitor. Yes, there they are.
I think they are trying to express their happiness about the accession of the new emperor, the symbol of the new era of the people in this country. And also, as it was mentioned before, there is no ceremony of this kind, and a number of articles describing this ceremony has been published.
Professor Tokoro, what is your reaction?
Well, as I said before, the Seiden-no-gi, the highlight was the time when the emperor ascended to Takamikura. I found both Takamikura and Michodai both wonderful. These are the symbols of the emperor and the empress, or the throne, and these were used quite properly. These both thrones have had long history and tradition, and also I thought they fit very well in the environment the ceremony took place, and I was very happy to see that. And I've heard the gongs and so on, drums, but I thought maybe we could have some more musical instruments.
How about Mr. Izutsu?
I was very impressed as well. The emperor and the crown prince and others dressed in traditional dresses, having long tails, and also 5 ladies in waiting. The way they progressed, walked on the platform, I saw the ancient tradition with my own eyes, and I was very impressed by that. People lining up there had different colored costumes, black, red, green, and so on. There may be some problems raised today. However, depending upon the status of these people, were clothing in different colored costumes. And actually, these were the official attendants. And in armored costume. However, it doesn't really mean that they were in protection of the emperor and the empress. It is actually following the tradition of China in 6th century, and it can be seen here in Japan, which is nice.
The guests are now leaving the Imperial Palace. The colors, black, red, and green, are they in particular order?
Yes, at the time of Suiko Emperor, this order was decided, and it is in the Yoryo Ritsuryo, or ordinance, that each color is associated with the level of the status in the society, black, red, and green in that order.
So those brownish colors was used for the emperor's costume, and the white was used for the morning ceremony by the emperor. White is the best color, the highest ranking color?
Yes, that's right. This is following the tradition of long tradition of Japan, and the white comes at the head.
Princess Diana just left the Seiden. We just heard experts' reactions to the ceremony. Now we hear the interviews with several distinguished members of private sectors who were invited to the Emperor's Spring Garden Party this year.
The painter Ikuo Hirayama says he would like to offer his hearty congratulations to the Emperor on his accession, and he says the Emperor has travelled abroad many times since his youth and so is familiar with the outside world. And he says that if the Emperor speaks about Japanese culture in his own words and directly to people overseas, this will enhance the world's understanding of Japan and of Japanese culture. And Mr. Hirayama says that the Emperor will therefore have a very important role to play in this respect. The orchestral conductor Takashi Asahina says that the Emperor will have to assume a very important responsibility for a long time to come. And he says this kind of responsibility may require hard work. So in view of this, he says the first thing he would like to say to the Emperor is that he should take good care of himself. The fashion designer Hanai Mori says that when Japan is talked about, its economic side is what is emphasized. But she says that Japan has a lot more to it than that, and that the imperial family personifies what's best in Japanese tradition. She says she hopes that the emperor will continue to meet people from overseas and travel overseas to tell the story of Japan. The president of the Japan Sumo Association, Katsuji Futagoyama, says that when the emperor was crown prince, he came to the Kokugikan Sumo Stadium and listened to many explanations about the bouts. On these occasions, he says, the crown prince was gentle and mild and always smiled at him. He says that the late Showa emperor was very fond of sumo and visited Kokugikan about 40 times. He says he hopes His Majesty will also come many times to enjoy the bouts with the other fans. A commentator, Daizo Kusayanagi, says that the emperor has now become the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people as stipulated by the constitution. But he says that in Japan, like elsewhere in the world, the book of history's pages keeps on turning, and he says that the emperor appears to be open to the changes taking place in the state and society. He says that being a symbol of unity does not mean that he should remain aloof from the public. He says he hopes the imperial family will be flexible towards changes in public values and in society, so that the people and the imperial family remain close for years to come.
We just heard interviews with 5 distinguished members of private industry and arts. We just received information that the foreign guests did not join in the banzais.
That's correct.
Now we are going to take a look at the reactions from foreign correspondents stationed in Japan. We have a live report from the Foreign Press Center. Our reporter, Tatsuru Yamada, is there.
This is a press center established in a hotel in Tokyo, about 1,500 square meter size. There are a number of televisions and facsimiles and telephones connecting Japan and other parts of the world. And foreign correspondents are writing and sending their articles abroad. There are press cards issued for foreign correspondents, total 900 or so. That means more than 900 or almost 900 people, foreign correspondents, are working on this event. After the accession to the throne ended, everybody went to the typewriter.
Excuse me, but where did you come from?
I come from Belgium.
ベルギーからの方。ニュースエージェンシー or newspaper?
I'm writing for a newspaper in Belgium. A daily newspaper. Yes.
ベルギーの新聞記者の方です。Could you tell me the headline of your story?
Yes, I think it's very important that Emperor Akihito remembered his father Showa. But at the other hand, emphasized he wanted to be the symbol of state and unity of Japanese people. Also, Kaifu said it twice. He wants to be the emperor has to be the symbol. So that's very important. It's a combination between tradition and the new constitution. And at the other hand, I tell people in Belgium, of course, that my king Baudouin had a very important, was the most distinguished guest here in at the ceremonies.
Thank you very much. 非常に昭仁新天皇陛下が即位されたことは新しい日本にとって重要ではないかということでニュースを配信しているということであります。
As you listened to the interview just now, I also talked to a number of other correspondents from abroad, and I found that most of the mass media reporting this event, the accession to the throne, rather calmly. At the time of the funeral of the late Showa emperor last year, there were a great deal of repercussions. Some newspapers abroad reported about the time right immediately after the end of the war, and this time the atmosphere is rather quiet, but within that quiet atmosphere, I think foreign countries are looking forward to see what happens in the future.
This was the reaction from foreign reporters and correspondents. At the south entrance of the Imperial Palace, Prince and Princess of Wales are about to leave in their car. From the courtyard, the bearers of the items of ceremonies are coming into the building. What kind of foreign information you are receiving, Mr. Wada?
Well, you listened to the interview, and in that interview, that the correspondent said Emperor Akihito, but it is not usual, or will never use the, it is only the Japanese emperor in which we use Emperor Akihito. The title comes before the name. And I haven't heard any news about the articles wired abroad from Japan. I think most of the correspondents are sending from Tokyo the stories about the family, imperial family, and the history so far. In São Paulo, there is a newspaper article on the first page of the paper about Emperor Akihito. And many of the articles wired speak about the tight security in Tokyo. Some 30,000 policemen are mobilized. And one of the newspapers said that the events or the accession ceremony has been taking place in calm environment. However, the security is so tight, some of the individuals were checked into their own purses and so on. Also about the visiting leaders of the world, Prime Minister Kaifi is meeting Mr. Hassan and President Heltok of Israel and other dignitaries. The contents hasn't been revealed yet.
The Sokuire Seiden-no-gi live report began at 12:20, and the coverage is going to be over within 3 minutes or so. We had the coverage with 3 reporters and Professor Tokoro and the director of the Culture Museum, Mr. Izutsu. What is your reaction, Mr. Izutsu?
So far, especially the Seiden-no-gi, I have only seen in the pictures or drawings, but this was the first time that I saw on television. It was really wonderful for me to be able to do so. Yes, this ceremony really had 2 aspects, the tradition and also the contemporary aspect. I think it was carried out quite well. In the future, I think we can take more modern aspect of the things into this kind of ceremony.
This afternoon, the Emperor and Empress will have a motorcade from the Imperial Palace to the Akasaka Palace this afternoon. The motorcade will cross the two bridges at the palace and pass the Iwaida-bashi and pass by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department and by the Parliament Building, the Supreme Court, and move through the Aoyama-dori Avenue and arrive at the Aoyama-Ichome crossing and arrive at the main gate of the Akasaka Palace. The motorcade travels for over the distance of 4.7 kilometers. The royal couple is expected to arrive at the Akasaka Palace at 4 o'clock.
Well, NHK will be on the air at 3 o'clock to show the entire procession, but this transmission will be in Japanese only. This therefore ends our live coverage in English of the ceremony of accession to the throne.